This video is going to cover the final ending sequence for the Batman vs. Superman titles teaser. If we take a look at the content, we can see what we need to do with the files provided. I started by importing the background image, which is gotham.jpg. I'm going to drag it onto the screen, and I'm going to check to make sure I have enough time in my timeline for the sequence. I'll go to Composition, Composition Settings, and it's set for 14 seconds, and that will be fine. Now, I want this to stretch for the duration, so I'll put my playback head at the end of the timeline by hitting End or dragging. I'll select the clip, and I can drag and snap with the Shift key, or I can hold down the Option and hit the close bracket. Now in this image it goes from small to large, basically zooming in. So I'm going to zoom back on my comp window, and I'm going to center it. And I want this to come to this position where we're zoomed in on these buildings at about 12 seconds. So I'll punch in 1200. And I'm going to hit S for scale. I'll drop the first keyframe for scale. I'll return to the beginning of the timeline, hitting home on the keypad, and now I'm going to scale it down. And I don't want to see any of the black background of the comp, so I'll stop at about 45%, and now I'll tap my spacebar to preview that. I'm now going to import the Photoshop image with Batman and Superman. I intentionally did not import the whole folder at once because when you do, it flattens out the layers of a PSD that might be inside the folder. So I'm going to do that separately. I'll hit Command-I, I'll go to File, Import. I'll select Superman-Batman. And down at the bottom where it says Import As, I'm going to change it from Footage to Composition Retain Layer Size. And you'll see now you've got a comp that was pre-made, but also the folder, which we are interested in here, where the images are separate. Now, like the other compositions, we need a 2-second lag in the beginning to use for transitions. So I'll punch in 200. And now I'll drag my images on screen. Batman on the right, and then Superman on the left. I'll place them back to back, and I'll shift select both. I'll hit S on the keyboard, and I'll scale them down so they both fit on screen a little bit better. Now I'll return them so that they're back to back in the center of the comp. I'll shift select them, and then I'll snap them to the playback head, which is at 2 seconds. Now I'd like them to go the full distance of the composition, so I'll put my playback head at the end of the comp, and with them both selected I could shift and drag and snap, or I could hold down the Option once again and hit the close bracket. Now we just need to determine where we would like them to come to rest on screen, what time duration. I'm going to give them 4 seconds to come on to screen. So I'll add 4 seconds to the 2, which is 600. And at this point, I'm going to put the position keyframe for both of them. So I'll hit P on the keyboard. And if they're both selected, I can click on one of them, and it will set the keyframe for both. Or if you wish, you could do them individually. So as we've done in the past, I'm setting where I would like them to be. It's much easier, and then I'll go to the beginning of the comp and drag them off screen. I'll hit I to return to the beginning of those 2 clips, or I'll shift and snap, and then individually I will drag them off screen, Superman to the left, and then Batman to the right. So if we were to drag through our timeline, we have them coming in like this. Now that we have them animated, I'd like to put a mask on them to make them look a little translucent. So by using a mask and a feather like we did with the Superman and the Batman sequences, I'm going to hit Q on the keyboard. And I'm going to use the elliptical tool. I'll start with Superman. I'll click and drag inside the comp window. And I'm going to get V on the keyboard because I don't want the feather to fall on the outside edge so much. I'm more interested in the back and the bottom. Now I'm going to go down to the mask features. I'm going to the mask features, and in the mask features I'm going to put the feather on. And this is pretty subjective. I'm going to put the feather on at about 45. And then I'll do the same to the Batman image. Opening up the mask features, I'll make it 45 to start. Now I'll get my move tool and I'll just move this about on the bottom. And that looks pretty good. Now we're going to introduce the text. As in the other compositions, I've copy and pasted Henry Cavill from the Superman sequence. I'm going to drag through the timeline so that the text is 100% in scale. And I'll hit S and Shift P on the keyboard and delete the keyframes. And now I'm going to animate the text once I've changed it to God versus man and then a kind of a fictitious date here. Once we've done that, we're going to place it so that it begins where the two characters in the composition come to rest on screen, which is 6 seconds. I'll shift and snap my text to that point. Now we're ready to animate. I'm going to go to the text layer, and in the text layer I'm going to open up where I see text. And if I follow the text to the right, you'll see the word animate. I'm going to click on animate, and I'm going to choose tracking. And it's going to introduce a thing called the animator. And if I was to go down and change the tracking amount here from 0 to some number, you'll see that essentially it breaks those characters up. Now what I'd like to do is, at this point, set the first keyframe, and then drag until all the characters are off both sides of the screen. So it'll probably be in excess of 700. I'm now going to go to second number 11, and at second number 11 I'll make the tracking 0 again. So if I were to play through, I'll have my text coming on screen. With the text animated the way we want, I want to put an effect on it, and in order to put the effect on it, my text layer has to be in a composed layer. So I'll go to layer, down at the very bottom is pre-composed layer. I'll change it to God versus man text, and I'll make sure that move all attributes is checked off in the pre-compose attribute window. Hold down the option and hit the open bracket. I'm going to drag my playback head so that I can see the text on screen. We'll go to Effect, and we'll go to Blur and Sharpen, and I'm going to choose CC Radial Fast Blur. And you'll see that if you bring your text on layer, that you can change the amount of blur to what you might want it to be. I'm going to set the amount to 100. Set the playback head at the beginning of the text composition layer. Set the first keyframe. And now I'm going to move forward to 8 seconds. And at 8 seconds, I'll make the amount 0 again. If I were to drag through my timeline, I have that soft blur, and then gradually the text comes into view. Now I'm going to make one last adjustment because the blur is kind of pointing down. I'll click on the target next to center, and I'll just kind of center that more between the two lines of text. And we should have something like this. And that concludes the sequence animation for the end.